I was pulling weeds from my tomato bed when I heard the sharp click of designer heels on my driveway, and I knew before even looking up that my peaceful Saturday morning was about to get significantly worse. "Excuse me, but what exactly do you think you are doing?" The voice was shrill, indignant, and unmistakably belonged to Patricia Henderson, president of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association in suburban Denver, Colorado. I straightened up slowly, brushing dirt from my jeans, and turned to face her. She stood there in her pristine white pantsuit, clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield, her blonde bob perfectly styled despite the early hour. "Morning, Patricia," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Just tending my garden, same as I do every Saturday." Her eyes swept across my front yard with visible disgust. Where there had once been a bland expanse of Kentucky bluegrass, requiring constant watering in Colorado's semi-arid climate, I had spent the last 3 months transforming the space into a productive vegetable garden. Raised beds made from cedar planks held tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, and squash. Trellises supported climbing beans and peas. The borders were lined with herbs and edible flowers. It was my pride and joy. "This," she gestured dramatically at my garden, "is an absolute eyesore. I have received numerous complaints from your neighbors about this farm you have created in a residential neighborhood." I took a deep breath. My name is Yates Richardson, and I had moved to Willow Creek Estates 2 years ago after my divorce. The house had been a fresh start, and the garden had become my therapy. I was 38 years old, worked as a software engineer from home, and bothered absolutely nobody, or so I had thought. "Numerous complaints?" I asked. "Who complained?" Patricia's lips pressed into a thin line. "That is confidential HOA business. What matters is that this violates our community standards. Section 12. Subsection 4 of our covenants clearly states that all front yards must maintain a neat, uniform appearance consistent with neighborhood aesthetics." "I have read the covenants," I replied calmly. "Nowhere does it say I cannot have a vegetable garden. It says lawns must be maintained, which mine is. The garden beds are neat, well organized, and I have kept all the walkways clear." "It also says nothing about turning your property into a farm stand," she shot back. "This is a residential community with standards, Mr. Richardson, standards that you are flagrantly violating." I could feel my temper starting to rise, but I forced myself to remain calm. "Patricia, with all due respect, this garden is not violating any rules. I have landscaping fabric to prevent weeds. The beds are uniform and well maintained, and everything is growing beautifully. If anything, it adds character to the neighborhood." She made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a snort. "Character? It looks like something out of rural farmland. This is Willow Creek Estates, not a homestead. You have 1 week to remove all of this and restore your lawn to its original condition, or the HOA will take legal action." "Legal action," I repeated, incredulous. "Over a vegetable garden, over a violation of our community standards, yes." She pulled a sheet of paper from her clipboard and thrust it toward me. "This is your official notice. 1 week, Mr. Richardson." She turned on her heel and marched back down my driveway, leaving me standing there with the notice in my hand. I looked down at it. The letterhead read, "Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association," and the text was full of legal jargon, but the message was clear. Remove the garden or face fines and potential legal proceedings. I went inside and immediately pulled up the HOA covenants on my computer. I had reviewed them before moving in, and I did so again now with meticulous care. There was nothing, absolutely nothing, that prohibited vegetable gardens or specified what type of plantings were required in front yards. The language was vague about maintaining neat appearance and consistency with neighborhood character. But my garden was undeniably neat, and several other houses had elaborate flower gardens that were far more varied than the basic lawn setup. This was personal. Patricia had never liked me, I realized. When I had first moved in, I had declined to join the welcome committee and had politely refused her invitation to a neighborhood cocktail party, citing my work schedule. She had been cool toward me ever since, but I had not realized she held an actual grudge. The following Monday, I called a lawyer. His name was Marcus Webb, and he specialized in property law. I explained the situation over the phone. They are threatening legal action over a vegetable garden. He asked, sounding amused. That is what the notice says. Send me a copy of that notice and your HOA covenants. Let me review them and get back to you. I scanned and emailed everything over, then tried to focus on my work, but I kept glancing out the window at my garden. The tomatoes were just starting to ripen. The cucumber vines were heavy with fruit. I had been planning to donate the excess produce to the local food bank. The idea of tearing it all out made me feel physically ill. Marcus called me back the next afternoon. Yates, I have reviewed everything. Their case is weak. Very weak. The covenant language is too vague to specifically prohibit what you are doing, and there is actually a pretty strong legal precedent in Colorado for the right to grow food on your own property. There was a case in Thornton a few years back where a woman successfully fought her HOA over a similar issue. So what do I do? For now, ignore their deadline. Keep maintaining your garden. They will likely escalate, probably with fines, and eventually they might take you to court. If they do, we have a very strong defense. I would also recommend documenting everything. Take photos of your garden regularly, showing how neat and well maintained it is. Keep records of any interactions with the HOA. Will this be expensive? It could be, but here is the thing. If they take you to court and lose, which I think is very likely, you can sue for your legal fees. HOAs hate publicity about overreach too. Sometimes just showing you are willing to fight makes them back down. I thanked him and hung up, feeling somewhat better but still anxious. I spent the rest of the week photographing my garden from every angle, documenting the healthy plants, the neat bed edges, the organized layout. I even measured everything to show the beds were symmetrical and professionally constructed. The 1-week deadline came and went. I continued caring for my garden as usual. 2 days later, I received another letter from the HOA. This one informed me that I was being fined $200 for non-compliance, with additional fines of $50 per day until the violation was corrected. I forwarded it to Marcus. Let them rack up the fines, he said. Do not pay anything. We will deal with it all at once if this goes to court. Over the next few weeks, life in Willow Creek Estates became increasingly uncomfortable. Patricia made a point of driving slowly past my house multiple times a day, stopping to take photos of my garden. I noticed several neighbors who had previously been friendly now avoided eye contact when I waved. One evening, I found a note stuck to my front door. It was unsigned, but the message was clear. You are ruining our neighborhood. Leave. I showed it to Marcus, who told me to keep it as evidence of harassment. Not everyone in the neighborhood was hostile, though. About 3 weeks into the dispute, I was watering my garden one evening when my next-door neighbor, Walter Chen, came over. He was in his 60s, retired, and had always been pleasant but distant. Hey, Yates, he said, approaching tentatively. I wanted you to know that I think what Patricia is doing is ridiculous. Your garden is beautiful. My wife and I were just talking about how much we enjoy seeing it. Thank you, I said, genuinely touched. That means a lot. Patricia told me there were numerous complaints. Walter scoffed. I would bet money that the only complaint came from Patricia herself. She has been on a power trip ever since she became HOA president. Last year she tried to fine the Johnsons for painting their shutters navy blue instead of black. Navy blue. Like there is some huge difference. Why do people keep electing her? Most people do not pay attention to HOA elections. She runs unopposed because nobody else wants the job. It is all about control for her. He paused. Look, if this goes to court or anything, let me know. I would be happy to testify that your garden is not bothering anyone and that it looks great. I really appreciate that, Walter. He nodded and headed back to his house. That conversation lifted my spirits considerably. I was not alone in this. The fines continued to accumulate. After a month, the total was over $1,500. Then I received a letter from a law firm representing the HOA. It stated that the HOA was prepared to place a lien on my property if I did not pay the outstanding fines and remove the garden immediately. Marcus was not concerned. This is all posturing. A lien for HOA fines requires certain legal steps, and they know they are on shaky ground. They are trying to scare you into compliance. Do not give in. But the stress was getting to me. I loved my house, my garden, my quiet life. I had not signed up for a legal battle with a vindictive HOA president. Some nights I lay awake wondering if I should just give in, restore the lawn, and plant my vegetables in containers in the backyard where nobody could complain. Then something happened that changed everything. It was a Saturday morning in mid-July, about 2 months after Patricia's first visit. I was harvesting cucumbers when a car pulled up and a woman got out. She was in her 40s, carrying a professional camera, and she introduced herself as Jennifer Martinez from the Denver Post. Mr. Richardson, I am writing a story about HOA overreach, particularly regarding residential food gardens. I heard about your situation through a local gardening forum, and I would love to interview you if you are willing. I hesitated for only a moment. Sure, I said. Let me tell you what has been happening. We spent over an hour talking. She photographed the garden extensively, and I showed her all the documentation I had been keeping. The letters, the fines, everything. She interviewed Walter Chen as well, and she told me she was going to reach out to Patricia for the HOA's side of the story. This is a growing issue across the country, Jennifer explained. Food security, sustainable living, lowering water usage in drought-prone areas. Yet many HOAs are stuck in this mindset that only traditional lawns are acceptable. Your case could really help highlight the need for change. The article ran the following week on the front page of the Denver Post's Metro section. The headline read, Willow Creek HOA takes war against vegetables to new heights. It was fair and factually accurate, but it did not paint Patricia or the HOA in a flattering light. The photos of my garden showed how attractive and well-organized it was, contradicting the eyesore narrative. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The story was picked up by local TV news stations. My phone rang constantly with interview requests. A local gardening nonprofit reached out to offer support. But most surprisingly, I started receiving visits and messages from other Willow Creek residents expressing support. One of them was Wendy Cole, a woman in her early 30s who lived 3 streets over. She knocked on my door on the evening the article came out. Yates, hi. I know we have never officially met, but I wanted to say thank you, she said. I've been wanting to plant a vegetable garden for years, but I was too scared of what the HOA would say. Seeing you stand up to Patricia has inspired me. I am planting one next spring, no matter what she says. That is great, I said. Let me know if you need any advice or want some seeds. She was not the only one. Over the next week, I had a dozen similar conversations. People were tired of Patricia's heavy-handed leadership and arbitrary rule enforcement. The negative publicity had embarrassed many residents who had not even been aware of the dispute until the article ran. The HOA held an emergency meeting a week after the article was published. I attended, along with Marcus. The community center meeting room was packed, far more crowded than the usual handful of attendees. Patricia sat at the head table with two other board members, looking flustered and angry. She called the meeting to order and immediately launched into a defensive speech. There has been a lot of misinformation circulating about the HOA's enforcement actions regarding Mr. Richardson's property. I want to make clear that we are simply upholding the standards that all residents agreed to when they purchased their homes. These standards exist to protect property values and maintain the character of our community. What character? Someone called out from the audience. Boring lawns that waste water. There was scattered applause. Patricia's face reddened. Order, please. If anyone has concerns about the covenants, the proper channel is to submit a formal request for review, not to air complaints in the media. Walter Chen stood up. Patricia, I have lived here for 12 years. I have served on this board in the past. And I have never seen such a ridiculous abuse of power. Yates's garden is beautiful. It is neat, it is productive, and it is not violating any specific rule. You are pursuing this vendetta because you do not like that he turned down your welcome committee. The room erupted. People were shouting agreement, calling for Patricia to drop the case, demanding her resignation. She tried to restore order by banging her gavel, but it was chaos. Finally, one of the other board members, a man named David Park, stood up and spoke directly to Patricia. Patricia, I think we need to vote on whether to continue pursuing this matter. The publicity has been terrible for the HOA, and frankly, I do not think we have a legal leg to stand on. We have a duty to enforce the covenants, Patricia insisted. Then let us vote, David said firmly. The vote was 2-1, with Patricia casting the only vote to continue. The case was officially dropped and all fines were rescinded. I should have been relieved, and I was, mostly. But Patricia's expression as she stormed out of that meeting told me this was not over for her, even if it was over for the HOA officially. I was right. 2 weeks later, I woke up one morning to find that someone had vandalized my garden. Tomato plants were uprooted and thrown across the yard. Cucumber vines had been cut. Someone had poured salt in several of the beds. The destruction was extensive and clearly deliberate. I called the police. Officer Ramirez arrived within 20 minutes and walked through the damage with me, taking photos and notes. Any idea who might have done this? He asked. I have a pretty strong suspicion, I said, and explained the HOA situation. You have security cameras. No, I never thought I would need them. He nodded sympathetically. I will file a report, but without evidence, there is not much we can do. I would recommend installing cameras now, though. If this happens again, we will need footage to press charges. I spent the rest of the day cleaning up and assessing the damage. Some plants could be saved, but others were total losses. The salt contamination meant I would have to replace the soil in those beds entirely. I was heartbroken and furious. Marcus advised me to document everything and send a formal letter to the HOA board stating that while I had no proof, the timing was suspicious given the recent dispute. Create a paper trail, he said. If this escalates further, you want evidence that you reported the harassment. I installed security cameras that same week, 2 in the front yard with clear views of the garden and driveway, and 1 at the back door. For a few weeks, nothing happened. I replanted what I could and tried to salvage the rest. The summer was winding down, and I started thinking about fall crops like kale and broccoli. Life seemed to be returning to normal. Then, on a Tuesday evening in late August, I was inside working when my phone buzzed with a security alert. I pulled up the camera app and watched in real time as someone in dark clothing and a hood approached my garden. They were carrying what looked like a bottle. I did not think. I just ran outside. "Hey," I shouted. "Get away from my garden." The figure spun around, and even in the dim light of the street lamps, I recognized her. Patricia Henderson froze like a deer in headlights, the bottle still in her hand. For a moment, we just stared at each other. "Patricia, what are you doing?" She recovered quickly, drawing herself up. "I was walking by and noticed some weeds in your beds. I thought I would help out. At 9 o'clock at night, with what looks like a bottle of herbicide. I do not know what you are talking about." "The cameras," I said, pointing. "I have cameras now. They have been recording you this whole time." Her face went pale. For the first time since I had met her, Patricia Henderson looked genuinely scared. She dropped the bottle and backed away. "This is harassment," she said, her voice shaky. "You are harassing me." "I am standing in my own yard," I said. "You are trespassing on my property with what I am pretty sure is poison. That is vandalism, Patricia. That is a crime." She turned and practically ran to her car, which was parked a few houses down. I watched her drive away, then picked up the bottle she had dropped. It was indeed herbicide, a powerful one that would have destroyed everything. I called Officer Ramirez immediately. He came out again, and this time I had evidence. I showed him the security footage, which clearly showed Patricia approaching the garden and her face when I confronted her. The bottle had her fingerprints on it. "This is pretty clear-cut," Ramirez said. "Do you want to press charges?" I thought about it. Part of me just wanted this to be over. But another part of me knew that if I did not follow through, Patricia would just keep escalating. Who knew what she might do next? "Yes," I said. "I want to press charges." Patricia Henderson was arrested the following day for attempted criminal mischief and trespassing. The arrest made the news, of course. The Denver Post ran another article, this time with the headline, "HOA President Arrested After Alleged Attack on Resident's Garden." The story went viral on social media. National news outlets picked it up as an example of HOA abuse taken to criminal extremes. The Willow Creek HOA board held another emergency meeting, and Patricia was immediately removed as president. David Park took over temporarily, and he personally called me to apologize on behalf of the organization. "What Patricia did was unconscionable," he said. "The board is going to be reviewing all our enforcement policies and updating the covenants to be more specific and reasonable. We are also going to be explicitly allowing vegetable gardens because, honestly, this whole thing has made us realize how outdated our thinking was." "I appreciate that," I said. "I also want you to know that the HOA will be covering the cost of repairing any damage Patricia caused. It is the least we can do." But Patricia was not done fighting. Her lawyer argued that the attempted vandalism was a misunderstanding, that she had simply been trying to help with what she perceived as weeds, and had not realized it was herbicide in the bottle. The prosecutor was not buying it, especially given the history of harassment and the security footage showing her trying to hide her actions. The case went to trial in early October. I had to testify, describing the months of harassment, the first vandalism incident, and finally catching Patricia in the act. The security footage was played for the jury. Walter Chen testified about Patricia's pattern of aggressive HOA enforcement. Jennifer Martinez even testified about the context of HOA overreach and Patricia's hostile reaction to the original article. Patricia's lawyer tried to paint me as an uncooperative homeowner who had deliberately flouted HOA rules and created a hostile situation. But the evidence was too strong. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before finding Patricia guilty of attempted criminal mischief. The judge, a stern woman in her 50s named Judge Carolyn Martinez, was not sympathetic to Patricia's claims that she had been misunderstood. Mrs. Henderson, you held a position of trust in your community, and you abused that position to wage a personal vendetta against Mr. Richardson. When legal means did not produce the result you wanted, you escalated to criminal behavior. This court takes property rights very seriously, and we also take food security seriously. The idea that you would try to destroy someone's source of fresh, healthy food because you found it aesthetically displeasing is deeply troubling. Patricia was sentenced to 6 months of probation, 200 hours of community service at a local food bank, and ordered to pay restitution for the damage to my garden. She was also prohibited from holding any HOA leadership position during her probation, but the story did not end there. Remember the original HOA violation notice that had started everything? The one threatening legal action if I did not remove my garden. I had never forgotten it, and neither had Marcus. You know, he said to me after Patricia's criminal trial concluded, we could actually turn this around. The HOA technically never officially withdrew their case. They just voted to stop pursuing it. But all those fines they assessed, the threats of a lien, we could argue that was an abusive process, especially now that Patricia has been found guilty of targeted harassment. You mean sue them? Not the HOA necessarily, but Patricia personally. For harassment, emotional distress, and abuse of her position. And we could also push for a declaratory judgment that specifically affirms your right to maintain the garden. It would set a precedent for other homeowners dealing with similar issues. I thought about it. Part of me wanted to just move on, but I also thought about Wendy Cole and the others who had told me they wanted to plant gardens but had been too afraid. If I could help change things, maybe all of this would mean something. Let us do it, I said. We filed suit in late October. The case was assigned to the same Judge Martinez who had handled Patricia's criminal trial. Marcus argued that Patricia had abused her position as HOA president to target me specifically, that the violation notices and fines had been issued in bad faith, and that her subsequent criminal actions proved the harassment was personal rather than legitimate HOA enforcement. We also asked the court to issue a declaratory judgment affirming that vegetable gardens were permissible under the HOA covenants as written, which would prevent any future attempts to ban them. Patricia's lawyer tried to get the case dismissed, arguing that the criminal conviction was separate from her actions as HOA president, but Judge Martinez disagreed. The evidence presented in the criminal trial makes it quite clear that Mrs. Henderson's actions as HOA president were part of a pattern of targeted harassment, she ruled. This case will proceed. The trial was scheduled for December. In the meantime, life in Willow Creek Estates had changed dramatically. The new HOA board, led by David Park, had implemented a series of reforms. Meetings were now better publicized, and more residents were attending. The covenants were being updated with specific, clear language rather than vague, community standards provisions. And several other homeowners had started planning their own vegetable gardens for the following spring. Wendy Cole stopped by in November to show me her garden plans. She had drawn up elaborate designs for raised beds in her front yard, with a mix of vegetables and pollinator-friendly flowers. I am so excited, she said, and I have 4 other neighbors who are doing it too. We are calling ourselves the Willow Creek Garden Club. We are going to do seed swaps and help each other out. Would you want to join? I would love to, I said. The trial began on December 3rd. It was a civil case, so there was no jury, just Judge Martinez listening to arguments from both sides. Marcus presented the timeline of harassment, Patricia's initial violation notice, the escalating fines, the threatening letters, the first vandalism incident, and finally her arrest attempting to poison my garden. He presented testimony from Walter Chen and other neighbors about Patricia's targeting of me specifically. He showed photos of my garden, demonstrating that it was neat, well-maintained, and objectively not an eyesore. Patricia's lawyer argued that she had been acting in her official capacity as HOA president, enforcing what she believed were legitimate violations. He tried to separate her personal actions from her HOA duties, but the evidence made that separation impossible. On December 10th, Judge Martinez issued her ruling. I sat in the courtroom, Marcus beside me, as she read her decision. This court finds that Mrs. Patricia Henderson did indeed engage in harassment of Mr. Yates Richardson through her abuse of her position as HOA president. The pattern of escalating enforcement actions, coupled with her subsequent criminal behavior, demonstrates that her actions were not good faith attempts to enforce community standards, but rather a personal vendetta. Mr. Richardson is awarded $15,000 in damages for harassment and emotional distress. Mrs. Henderson is also ordered to pay Mr. Richardson's legal fees, which the court finds he was forced to incur due to her bad faith actions. Furthermore, this court issues a declaratory judgment regarding the Willow Creek Estate's HOA covenants. The court finds that the language prohibiting eyesores and requiring neat appearance is impermissibly vague as applied to prohibit vegetable gardens. Mr. Richardson's garden, as evidenced by extensive photographic documentation, is neat, well organized, and aesthetically pleasing. In fact, this court finds it to be quite beautiful. The court hereby declares that the Willow Creek Estate's HOA covenants as written do not prohibit vegetable gardens in front yards, provided such gardens are maintained in a neat and orderly manner. Any future attempt to ban or restrict such gardens would require a formal amendment to the covenants with proper notice and voting procedures. This case is dismissed with prejudice. Mr. Richardson, you have the right to maintain your garden without interference from the HOA. I felt like I could breathe for the first time in months. Marcus was grinning beside me. Across the courtroom, Patricia sat with her head down, her lawyer packing up papers with a resigned expression. Outside the courthouse, Jennifer Martinez from the Denver Post was waiting. She had followed the story from the beginning, and she wanted a comment on the verdict. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Relieved," I said, "and hopeful. This was never just about my garden. It was about the right to use your own property in reasonable ways, to grow your own food, to not live in fear of arbitrary rules enforced by people on power trips. I hope this helps other people who are dealing with similar situations." The article ran the next day, and once again, the response was overwhelming. I received emails and messages from people all over the country who were fighting their own HOA battles over gardens, solar panels, clotheslines, and other sustainable living choices. Several used the judge's ruling in my case as precedent in their own disputes. The Institute for Justice, a national nonprofit that fights government overreach, reached out to ask if they could feature my case in their educational materials about property rights. A Colorado state legislator contacted me to say she was drafting a bill to limit HOA authority over residential food gardens statewide. My case had sparked something bigger than I had ever imagined. Winter came to Denver and my garden went dormant, but I spent the cold months planning for spring. I sketched out new bed layouts, ordered seeds from catalogs, and dreamed about tomatoes and peppers and all the things I would grow. The Willow Creek Garden Club held its first official meeting in January at Wendy Cole's house. 15 people showed up, eager to talk about composting and crop rotation and the best varieties for Colorado's climate. We planned a neighborhood garden tour for the summer and talked about organizing bulk seed orders to save money. Patricia Henderson moved away in February. I heard through the neighborhood gossip network that she had bought a condo in Aurora, far from Willow Creek Estates. I did not feel triumphant about it, just sad that things had escalated so far. If she had just let me grow my vegetables in peace, none of this would have happened. David Park was officially elected HOA president in March, running unopposed but with actual enthusiastic support from the community. One of his first acts was to organize a covenant revision committee with input from all residents. The new covenants, approved by an overwhelming vote in April, included explicit language protecting vegetable gardens, solar panels, xeriscaping, and other sustainable choices. They also included strict procedures for enforcement actions, requiring written warnings with specific violations cited, and an appeals process before any fines could be assessed. Spring arrived, and I planted my garden again. This time, I added even more beds, expanding into an area that had been struggling lawn near the sidewalk. I planted carrots and lettuce and radishes. I started tomato seedlings indoors and dreamed of the harvest to come. On a warm Saturday morning in May, I was transplanting those tomato seedlings into the front beds when a car slowed down on the street. I tensed for a moment, old reflexes from the Patricia days. But the driver was just a middle-aged man I did not recognize. He rolled down his window. "Hey, is this the garden that was in all the news?" he called out. "Yeah, that is me," I said. "It looks great, man. Really inspiring. My wife and I are about to start our own fight with our HOA over in Arvada. We are putting in raised beds next month, and if they try to stop us, we are going to point to your case. Just wanted to say thanks for standing up to those bullies." He drove off before I could respond, but I stood there smiling. The garden had become something bigger than just my personal space. It was a symbol of resistance against arbitrary authority, a statement that people should have the right to grow food on their own land. The Willow Creek Garden Club grew throughout the spring and summer. By June, there were 23-member households, and our neighborhood looked noticeably different. Front yards that had been nothing but grass now sported colorful arrays of vegetables and flowers. The amount of water we collectively saved by replacing thirsty lawns with gardens and mulched beds was significant. And the sense of community that developed around our shared interest in growing food was something I had never expected but deeply valued. Walter Chen and I became good friends. He started helping me with the heavy work in my garden, and in exchange, I taught him about growing vegetables. His wife Lucy started baking bread and would trade loaves for fresh tomatoes and peppers. It was the kind of neighborhood connection that HOAs claim to foster, but often actually prevent through their rigid enforcement of conformity. In July, the Colorado legislature passed the Residential Food Gardens Protection Act, inspired in part by my case. The law prohibited HOAs from banning vegetable gardens and established that gardens could not be considered eyesores or nuisances if they were maintained in a reasonably neat condition. Governor Polis signed it with a ceremony at a community garden in Denver, and I was invited to attend. Standing there, watching the governor sign a law that would protect thousands of gardeners across the state, I felt like all the stress and conflict had been worth it. The garden tour we organized in August was a huge success. Over 100 people from surrounding neighborhoods came to walk through Willow Creek Estates and see all the various gardens. Wendy Cole's front yard was stunning, a mix of vegetables and pollinator plants that was both productive and beautiful. The Martinez family 3 streets over had built an elaborate vertical garden with trellises and hanging baskets. And my garden, the one that had started it all, was bursting with tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, squash, and herbs. A local TV station covered the tour, interviewing several of us about the transformation of the neighborhood. The reporter asked me if I had ever imagined things would turn out this way when Patricia first told me to remove my garden. Honestly, no, I said. I just wanted to grow some tomatoes. But sometimes standing up for something small leads to bigger changes. I am grateful that I fought back instead of giving in, because look at what we have now. I gestured at the gardens around us, at the neighbors talking and sharing tips, at kids eating cherry tomatoes straight off the vine. This is what community should look like. As fall approached, I started preparing the garden for winter crops. I planted kale, broccoli, and carrots, which would survive into the colder months. I saved seeds from my best tomato plants for next year. And I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. A year and a half ago, I had been a recently divorced guy just trying to find some peace and purpose in tending plants. Now I was an accidental activist, someone whose stubborn refusal to remove a vegetable garden had helped change laws and inspire a movement. It was not something I had planned or wanted exactly, but I was proud of it nonetheless. Patricia's final payment of the judgment against her arrived in October. $15,000 plus legal fees, totaling nearly $40,000. It was a substantial amount of money, and I thought carefully about what to do with it. I could have kept it, used it to renovate my house or take a vacation or just pad my savings, but that felt wrong somehow. Instead, I donated the entire amount to 3 organizations. The local food bank where Patricia had done her court-ordered community service, the Institute for Justice to support their property rights work, and a Denver nonprofit that helps low-income families start vegetable gardens. The money that had come from Patricia's attempt to destroy my garden would now help feed people and protect others' rights to grow their own food. There was a satisfying symmetry to that. Winter came again, my second winter in the house, but everything felt different now. The neighborhood had changed, I had changed, and the legal landscape around HOA enforcement had changed. I spent the cold months attending Willow Creek Garden Club meetings, now held monthly at various members' houses. We planned for the spring, shared recipes for preserving the harvest, and built a real community around our shared values. In February, I got an unexpected call from a documentary filmmaker. She was working on a film about HOA overreach and wanted to feature my story. I agreed, and she spent several days interviewing me, Marcus, Walter, Jennifer Martinez, and others who had been part of the saga. The documentary, titled Lords of the Lawns, HOA Abuse in America, premiered at the Denver Film Festival that fall and was later picked up by a streaming service. My garden, and the fight to save it, reached an even wider audience. But the most meaningful outcome was not the publicity or the legal precedent or even the new law. It was the relationships and the community that had grown from that initial conflict. The Willow Creek Garden Club expanded to include more than just vegetable gardeners. We organized tool swaps, a neighborhood compost system, and educational workshops. Kids in the neighborhood started learning about where food comes from by helping in the gardens. Elderly residents who could not garden themselves enjoyed walking around the neighborhood and seeing the growing things. On a warm evening in May, 2 years after Patricia had first threatened me about my garden, the garden club organized a potluck dinner. Everyone brought dishes made with produce from their gardens. We set up long tables in the community center courtyard and ate together, laughing and sharing stories. Wendy Cole's kids performed a skit about composting that they had written themselves. Walter Chen gave a presentation about the water savings our neighborhood had achieved by replacing lawns with gardens. And I looked around at all these people, this community that had formed in the aftermath of conflict, and felt deeply grateful. David Park stood up to make a toast. 2 years ago, this neighborhood was divided over something that should not have been controversial: growing food. Thanks to Yates's courage in standing up to bullying and arbitrary enforcement, we have become a model for what an HOA community can be. We prove that you can have standards and pride in your neighborhood while also respecting individual property rights and encouraging sustainability. Here is to many more years of growing together. Everyone raised their glasses, and I felt a lump in my throat. The journey from that first confrontation with Patricia to this moment had been difficult, stressful, and sometimes frightening. But it had also been worthwhile in ways I never could have anticipated. Later that evening, as I walked home past gardens illuminated by streetlights, I thought about how much had changed. The legal victories mattered, of course. The precedent that protected other gardeners mattered. But what mattered most was that I had learned something important about not backing down from bullies, about standing up for what you believe in even when it seems easier to just comply. My garden continued to thrive, season after season. Each year I tried new varieties, experimented with different techniques, and shared my harvest with neighbors and the food bank. The tomatoes that had started this whole journey remained my favorite crop, and each summer when I bit into the first ripe one, I remembered why I had fought so hard to keep my garden. 3 years after the initial confrontation, I received a letter from Patricia. It was forwarded through Marcus, with no return address. The letter was brief. "Mr. Richardson, I am writing to apologize for my actions regarding your garden. I have spent these past years in therapy, working through issues of control and the need to dominate others. I realize now that my behavior toward you was abusive and wrong. Your garden was never an eyesore. It was beautiful, and I was jealous that I had never had the courage to do something so bold and different. I destroyed what I could not control, and for that, I am truly sorry. I do not expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I recognize the harm I caused. I hope you are still gardening and that your life is peaceful. Sincerely, Patricia Henderson." I read the letter several times. I felt a mix of emotions: vindication, sadness, and something like compassion. Patricia had been deeply troubled, taking out her issues on me and probably many others over the years. Her apology did not erase what she had done, but it showed growth and self-awareness. I wrote back a short note. "Patricia, thank you for your letter. I accept your apology. I hope you have found peace. The garden is still growing strong and the neighborhood has transformed in ways I never imagined. I hope you are in a better place now, both literally and figuratively. Take care, Yates Richardson." I never heard from her again, but that felt right. Some stories do not need continued contact between the parties. Her acknowledgement of wrongdoing and my acceptance of her apology were enough to close that chapter. As my 5th spring in the house approached, I found myself planning the most ambitious garden yet. The success of the Willow Creek Gardens had inspired the city of Denver to launch a program offering grants for residential food gardens, particularly in lower-income neighborhoods. I had been asked to serve on the advisory committee, helping design the program and evaluate applications. The work felt meaningful, extending the impact of my personal experience to help others access fresh, healthy food. The Willow Creek Garden Club now had over 50 member households, nearly a quarter of the subdivision. We had successfully lobbied the HOA to convert one of the underused common areas into a community garden with plots available to residents who did not have suitable space in their own yards. The transformation of the neighborhood was complete. On a Saturday morning in early spring, I was preparing beds for the new season when a young couple pulled up in a moving truck. They were clearly new to the neighborhood, and the woman got out and approached me. "Excuse me, is this Willow Creek Estates?" she asked. "It is," I said, standing up and brushing dirt from my hands. "Oh, good. We just bought a house on Maple Street. We specifically chose this neighborhood because of the gardens. We read about what happened here, about the HOA fight and how the community changed. We want to be part of that." Her husband joined us. We have been wanting to start growing our own food, and when we saw that this neighborhood was so supportive of it, we knew this was where we needed to be. I smiled, feeling a swell of pride. "Well, welcome to Willow Creek. I am Yates. And if you need any help getting your garden started, the Garden Club meets the first Saturday of every month. We would love to have you join us." They thanked me and headed back to their moving truck, excited to start unpacking. I watched them go, thinking about how far things had come. A neighborhood that had once threatened to place a lien on my property for growing vegetables was now actively attracting new residents because of those same gardens. That evening, Walter and Lucy came over for dinner. We ate on the back patio, enjoying food from the garden. A salad with early lettuce and radishes, bread from Lucy, and wine from a local winery. The conversation turned, as it often did, to the garden and everything that had happened. "You know, Yates," Walter said, "I have been thinking about writing a book about the whole experience, not just your story, but what it represents about HOAs, property rights, and community. I was a journalist before I retired. I think there is something important to document here." "I think that is a great idea," I said. "As long as you change everyone's names," he laughed. "Deal. Though I think Patricia's actual name might need to stay. She is a matter of public record now." We talked late into the night, reminiscing about the confrontations, the trials, the victories, and the community that had grown from conflict. It felt good to look back from this place of peace and security, knowing that the struggle had led to something genuinely positive. As the years continued to pass, my garden became a fixture of the neighborhood, as permanent and expected as any house or tree. New residents would walk by and comment on it, sometimes asking for advice or just complimenting the tomatoes. The fight that had once consumed my life faded into neighborhood lore. A story people told about how Willow Creek had transformed from a rigid, conformist subdivision into a vibrant community that valued sustainability and individual expression. I never regretted standing up to Patricia, never wished I had just torn out the garden and restored the lawn to avoid conflict. The struggle had been worth it, not just for the legal precedent or the community change, but for what it had taught me about courage and persistence. Sometimes the right thing to do is the hard thing, the thing that brings conflict and stress and uncertainty. But on the other side of that struggle can be growth, change, and a sense of purpose you never expected to find. My vegetable garden, the one that had started as simple therapy for a divorced man seeking peace, had become a symbol of resistance and a catalyst for change. And every summer when I bit into a sun-warmed tomato, pulled a crisp cucumber from the vine, or harvested armfuls of peppers, I remembered why it had all been worthwhile. This was my land, my garden, my food, and my freedom. Nobody had the right to take that away, Not even an HOA president with a clipboard and an inflated sense of authority. The garden grew on, season after season, and so did the community around it. And that, in the end, was the real victory.